Right, so welcome back to another Seek Strength video. Today we're going to talk about is front squatting. We're going to talk specifically about front squatting for taller lifters or limbier lifters. It's something that we get asked all the time in live streams. It pops up in comments on nearly all the squat videos. Any tips on squatting for taller lifters? Any tips for long femored people? Today I'm going to go through mainly the front squat, and there's loads of reasons for that. Some of the reasons are just a lot of time longer limbed lifters, particularly longer femored lifters, have really bad strength in their quads. So like they've really biased their posterior strength versus their anterior strength. Also, for a lot of people who watch this channel, sport specific strength. So in weightlifting, we want better quad strength. It's really something that's very, very important to the sport. Also, a lot of field sports athletes could do it much stronger quads. Obviously then, due to the fact where the bar is sitting, longer limbed lifters have more trouble with the front squat than they do with the back squat. Now, there are certain advantages to the front squat and the fact that we can manipulate that kind of center of mass of the barbell a small bit more easily, and the center of mass is further forward. But it is definitely a difficult movement for people with longer femurs. So in my case, right, I'm not hugely tall. I'm like somewhere in between 6'1" and 6'2", but I do have really long femurs, right? So I'm just not well built for squatting at all. My best weightlifting numbers ever were done with like a front squat of maybe 180 kilos, around 180 for a double maybe, just after my like best weightlifting total was hit. So when I was doing like 155 kilo cleans or failing 160 kilo cleans, my front squat was always something that really challenged me, right? Now, there's lifters who have really high levels of efficiency. They can front squat 160 kilos and clean 160 kilos. For me, that's just not possible. I don't have that level of efficiency with my technique. Also, because of how my front squat was at the time, I was very, very weak in catching the barbell. So I failed a lot of reps in the catch position. I'd get under, have racked the bar and not be able to stand it back up. And that was really like one of the main issues I had when I was concentrating a lot more on weightlifting. Also, things come into it with people that having issues with their front squat is a lot of the time we have athletes coming from different sports and they have injury issues, right? Two sports that are like two areas of sports that we tend to draw people into weightlifting from is CrossFit firstly, so we have a lot of shoulder issues, a lot of shoulder tightness, and the front rack becomes an issue. And then we obviously draw people from field sports and team sports in general, where ankle and knee stiffness tends to be like, it's obviously warranted. You need ankle stiffness for running and sprinting and jumping, but it's very, very inhibitory to having good front squat mechanics. So what did my old squat look like, or what did a lot of longer lifters squats look, or longer limbed lifters squats look like? Well, usually what we have is they'll initiate the squat fairly well, but they'll probably bring their hips back too far on the way back down. Their feet are usually going to be too wide, right? So if we have restriction of the ankles, knees, hips, and we don't have good squatting mechanics, we tend to just put our feet out wider, get our knees out more to the side, and we make more room. And it allows us to get into that kind of bottom position, or get into a deeper bottom position. This though is really not ideal, right? So it allows us to front squat in that way, but we're not front squatting for front squatting's sake, right? Or most of us aren't. When we're front squatting, we're doing it to get stronger quads. We're doing it to get better at weightlifting, better at powerlifting, better at being a field athlete, whatever it is. And so making this kind of quick fix of moving our feet out to the side, pointing our toes out to the side, and getting in a position that feels better, or that suddenly allows us to squat with better form, definitely isn't the solution we're looking for, right? And that's where a lot of my problem was. So I would do this where I'd bring my feet wider, I'd be able to sit down into a fairly deep front squat, and I trained my front squat like that for a long time. So I changed my front squat from maybe like, I think the first day I ever walked into a CrossFit gym, my front squat at 130 kilos in the first workout. And then a few years later, I was front squatting 185 or 190 kilos, just keeping the same technique. So feet wider, knees out to the side. What I wasn't focusing on though was I was focusing on being fast in the reps, because I thought like, oh, I want to be fast for weightlifting, so I'm going to be fast in my front squats when I do them. I was usually doing low reps because nobody ever really does volume in the front squat. And then what I was doing is like really focusing on a front rack position, right? I would think that the better my front rack was, the more upright my upper body could be, and I'd stop being in this kind of really hinged over position where my hips are way further back and my shoulders are way further forward. In reality, that's not what you need to focus on. Most of the time, a moderately good front rack position is good enough for 90% of the people to be able to do a front squat. Like, you don't need phenomenal mobility. Obviously, it's great if you have it, but to get started, you don't need really, really good mobility. What you do need, though, is you need a vertical torso, and most importantly, you need knees moving forward and loading of the quads. So when you start to make these changes, what do you need to change, right? If you're in that kind of really hip dominant, really hinged over front squat position now where your front squat isn't progressing, well, the first thing you need to do is you need to stop pointing your toes way out to the side, and you need to start bringing your feet in a small bit narrower. So by no means do you need to be in a narrow stance squat here. You don't need your feet to be exactly hip width. You just need to bring them in a small bit more. You need to bring your toes straighter ahead a small bit more, and you need to focus on that knee tracking forward and the knees staying forward as you continue to stand back up out of the squat. What this will do is it will obviously recruit a hell of a lot more of the quads. It will shift the focus from being just vastus lateralis and the outer quad more to being general quad strength, and definitely more into the vastus medialis. And it will also allow us to recruit all of our hamstrings when we're doing the squat. So it's really important. It will allow us, you might get anywhere near the depth, but it will allow us to recruit the actual muscle tissue we're trying to train. The other things it's going to do is it's going to force us to stay upright. So if at any point my knees start to shift back, my hips will go back, my shoulders will come forward, and that will be in back to that old position because our feet are now much closer together. My hips don't have anywhere to go. And if I start to kind of allow myself to hinge over in any way, my ass will just shoot back. So it's a challenging position to hold. It is a much less forgiving position to be squatting in, but this is really what you need to do if you are that kind of limbier person, if you're the taller person and you want to make your legs stronger and obviously make your front squat stronger. So when did I start doing this? I started doing this in around November, December of last year. I was training for a squatting and running event. Basically what happened was my squat got far too strong and it started to overtake where I needed to be around 4 months out or 3 months out from that competition date. And I then just said, okay, fuck it. My back squat is heavy enough now. I'm going to focus on front squatting for a while. And it allowed me just to take a step back and really kind of assess like where had my front squat gone wrong over the years. It was never great, but it was never terrible. Like, I was always able to get away with doing it, but I never got the recruitment I needed. I never got the kind of training stimulus I wanted from the front squat. And now it gave me this time to kind of come back in, check back in with the squat. So even though I'd achieved moderately heavy numbers, I think my 1RM previously had been around 190 kilos for a single. Now it allowed me to go up, hit 200 kilos for a relatively clean front squat single. But the change it has made to my clean, to my jerk, even to my snatch pull, just having more quad recruitment, quad development is gigantic. If you are that taller person, you really do need to think like, okay, is this happening to me? Am I using those longer limbs as some sort of an excuse that I have to squat in that hinged over position, that I just don't have good mobility, that I just don't have good movement? I will say my ankle mobility is probably as bad now as it's been at any point in the last 10 years. You know, like it's been so much better in the past, yet my squat mechanics are probably just as good as they've been in the past or possibly even better. What am I going to look at doing next? Well, obviously, like adding more kilos to a front squat is always better. How I'll go about doing that, obviously keeping the same technique. So keeping a much more stacked technique with the front squat is going to be number one. And then number two, and it's something I mentioned earlier, is actually doing volume with the front squat. People very rarely do it. Most of the time we'll back squat twice a week, front squat once a week maybe. And when we do our front squats, we tend to do singles, doubles or triples. The odd time you might do a set of 4. But you really do need to attack the front squat in the same way you attack your back squat, your deadlifts, your pressing, your bench pressing, your rows. the volume forms the basis for everything. So don't be afraid to do the sets of 8, the sets of 10. We've had people run the Road to Anywhere squat program at the front squats and make gigantic PBs. And if anything, they hit even larger kind of relative PBs than they do with their back squat, because they're so sensitive to this alteration in volume. They've never used volume. They're getting these kind of noob gains because they've never actually done prolonged volume in the front squat. So I would really recommend, like, even if it's not our squat program, just go and do some 10s, do some 8s, do some 6s, change your technique around, and I guarantee you won't feel like the kind of loosey-goosey, limmy lifter that you might have always felt like.